the island to a sense of what was described as a disaster, state of disaster. We had an impact of those who remember Operation Gulfstream, that the Gulfstream vessel collided with a very sensitive area of Tobago, and also with, of course, environmental impact of a very large magnitude spanning some 15 kilometers from Scarborough to T.H.A on the southwestern end of the island. Speaking back to the event of 9 months, there were decisions that needed to be made in terms of how do we treat with this impact. We were guided by the National Oil Spill Contingency Plan and also the Tobago Oil Spill Contingency Plan. There are those of us who think that it was a level 3 or a tier 3 rather, based on the attraction of the type of resources that were necessary. Probably it may be important, imperative for me to bring into context that this event happened the Thursday before our national carnival. And it poses a significant amount of stress in terms of its impact and the mobilization of resources that was not readily available on the island of Tobago. Being separated by 17 miles of water from our sister isle, a number of these resources had to make their way to Tobago, and that also poses a certain significant amount of challenges as you went forward. However, the exercise began promptly after it was distilled after 24 hours that we were dealing with primarily a shipwreck and an oil spill, and there were no souls on board. You will recall in the first 24 hours, based on the impact and the type of vessel that we saw, we taking the necessary precaution. We thought we were dealing with a search and rescue operation in the opening hours of this event. But nevertheless, it was quickly determined that we were just dealing with an ecological and also environmental impact on our shorelines. Ladies and gentlemen, the issue at hand speaks to the Studley Park quarry and the landfill which came into question. The landfill, I recalled, it was very important that immediately that we find a place to the extraction of the oil waste that were taken up and were removed from the shoreline. We had to sort cells to place those oil deposits. Immediately, there were consultations between major players such as the AMA, the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, and also key divisions within the Tobago House of Assembly, the Department of Marine Affairs, the Department of the Environment, and all of these entities came into the picture where this matter was concerned. Eventually, there were decisions taken that the Studley Park landfill was the area that was chosen to be able to store temporarily these oiled waste and liquid waste, oil liquid waste. Cells were the priority to be placed, and those cells were dug, lined in a particular manner to take certain mitigation and preventative measures where these wastes were concerned. And that went well according to plan. And I think that lays now the position that where we are. One of the things that we could say, we had a situation whereby our unit, T.H.A, was asked to do the necessary monitoring. And that monitoring went quite well. We recognize that it survived. Also, the dikes that were built around these cells prevented any leakages or runoff into our other important areas which I believe my colleague here, Mr. Melville, will speak to. Finally, I want to say that clearly we are aware that there was not any leak, or we would have conducted on the 4th of this month, our last June surveillance of the area. So we did some ground truthing, we did some reconnaissance in the area, which is something that we do on periodical periods, not just that area, but also what was happening with the Operation Gulfstream, the vessel itself, our environment at the mangroves. And these are drone flights that we conduct every so often to ensure that there are no leakages or no further damages to the environment. I think I will pass it back to you and pause there.
Certainly. Thank you so much, Mr. Stewart. And I think Mr. Stewart highlighted something that I feel the need to reiterate, which is the fact that the storage of the oil-like substance and everything surrounding it, we recognized very quickly that we needed to find both a short-term and a long-term plan solution for that. The short-term solution included storage at the Studley Park landfill, and we were to work through with all of our partners the long-term solution. It's also important for us to recognize that we spoke to, and the people of Tobago, I think, were very aware of the fact that that was the short-term plan. It was very difficult to try to hide such a huge set of activities. I remember passing along the way and seeing the huge trucks lined up, the tankers lined up, waiting to go up into Studley Park. So by no means were we trying to hide that this is what we were doing. At this point, though, I will hand over to Mr. Linford Beckles, who would speak from the perspective of the environmental management that we've been doing from the Tobago House of Assembly perspective to ensure that the short-term plan worked and is working. But also I would ask him to speak to what we did to work out the longer term planning or the longer term solution that we need to embark on.
Thank you very much, Dr. B. Israel. Thank you, Tobago and Trinidad and Tobago, for the opportunity to provide clarity on some of the issues raised by Dr. B. Israel and Mr. Alan Stewart. I sit here today in my capacity as the chairman of the T.H.A. Multidisciplinary Oil Spill Management Committee. And this committee was set up in the immediate aftermath of the oil spill, essentially to provide oversight to the activities that were really happening on the ground. And of course, to provide support to T.H.A, which was the primary agency responsible for effecting the shoreline cleanup across that 15-kilometer stretch that was impacted by the oil spill. The committee, given its name, essentially pulled from people with very many different skills from across the Tobago House of Assembly, and that committee also benefited from private expertise that was essentially honed in the oil spill, in the oil industry in Trinidad, in the person of Mr. James Trim, who most people would know as a very, very experienced person when it comes to the oil and gas industry in Trinidad and Tobago. So we benefited significantly from his advice and his expertise. I want to mention and put on record and remind all of us that the oil spill that happened on the 7th of February of 2004, it was a very significant event, not only in the context, well, of course in the context of Tobago, but not just in the context of Tobago, also in the context of Trinidad and Tobago. We are talking about 15 kilometers of shoreline impacted. That was the first of its kind in the Tobago context, the very first time that we were dealing with an impact of that nature. Interestingly, notwithstanding that Trinidad, given the structure of its economy, would experience oil spills and so on from time to time, it was also a first for many of the service providers who were assisting us with the shoreline cleanup here in Tobago. And first, from the perspective of the scale of the impact that they were actually dealing with. Many of them said to me privately and so on that they have never dealt with an oil spill of this scale before. Similarly, we did have some international expertise resident here on the island. Many of them were from NGOs. I can recall OSRL, Oil Spill Response Limited, and ITOF, who many of us are actually very, very, very familiar with. And some of the representatives of those organizations would have indicated to me that given their experience and so on, this oil spill was very, very significant. And for some of them, it was the largest oil spill that they were actually dealing with. So I think it is very important to mention that so that we can actually put this entire event into context. Something very significant happened in Tobago, really, really significant, something of a very large scale. And it happened in a space that is, one, geographically small, but two, lacked the necessary facilities to essentially deal with this thing and so on. As many of the first world countries, or even Trinidad, who has developed that capacity over time and so on, would have actually dealt with it and stuff. So I think we really need to put that into perspective and so on. I would think that, and I've actually put it on record before, that the way that the oil spill was dealt with, I think that those who were involved should be commended. And I'm not only referring to the Tobago-based entities. I am talking about the Trinidad entities led by the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, the private service providers, as well as the international agencies that would have provided assistance to us here in Tobago. I think everybody should really be commended for the efforts that they made in essentially effecting the shoreline and cleanup. As Mr. Stewart would have mentioned in his earlier comments, and that was essentially echoed by Dr. T.H.A. Israel, the oil was stored at Studley Park. The storage of the oil at Studley Park was an open secret. There was never any attempt to hide that and so on. In the daily briefings that were held at the command center, that was mentioned constantly. Apart from that, as Dr. B. Israel would have mentioned and so on, the tankers were lined up on the Windward Road, right? So waiting on their turn to go up to Studley Park, of course, because the road infrastructure is not wide enough to accommodate multiple tankers at the same time. So there was never any attempt to hide the fact that the oil was being stored there. So I want to mention that is one. The second thing, and I want to echo it again, is that the storage of the oil at Studley Park was always a temporary measure. Right? Studley Park is an integrated landfill. It is not specifically designed for long-term storage of material of that nature. All right? And of course, the choice of Studley Park was made after significant consultation with very many stakeholders. And at the end of the day, it was the best choice that we could have made given the time that we had and given the resources that were available to us here in Tobago. As I mentioned before, Studley Park was not specifically designed to store material of that nature. And of course, once you are going to store the material there, then there's a certain amount of risk that is associated with the storage of the material there. It was part of our responsibility to essentially manage that risk. And in the construction of the cells, Mr. Stewart would have already mentioned that care was taken to do the best that we can in terms of dealing with any potential for spillage. So, for example, all of the cells were actually bonded and so on, right? So if you go up there and so on, then you'll see a raised portion around those cells and so on, and that was essentially a mechanism to prevent spillage, particularly in the instance of heavy rainfall, for example, and so on, right? There was also an attempt to line the cells with polyurethane material. Mr. Stewart would also mention that as well. So we are not unaware that there was some risk associated with the storage of the material there. That is why we took the steps that we took in terms of the creation of the infrastructure, but also it is the reason why we committed only to a short-term storage of the material at that particular location. The report that Dr. B. Israel and Mr. Stewart would have referred to, and that's the recent report in the Express newspaper. The report would have indicated that there are very important water bodies that are being threatened by the storage of the oil, the temporary storage of the oil at Studley Park. And I just want to place it on record that the water bodies that I mentioned, one is the Hillsborough Reservoir, the other is the Green Hill Waterfall and the Green Hill River. I want to mention that nothing really could be further from the truth. I mean, anybody who understands geography would really understand that essentially is an impossibility. It's really an impossibility. It is really akin to, for the Tobago folks who are not as familiar with this and so on, who are not as familiar with the location, it is really akin to saying that if you store oil at Studley Park, then the oil has the potential of impacting a water body up at Signal Hill, right? Or for those of us who are listening and so on and are based in Trinidad, it is akin to saying that oil stored at Beetham on the Beetham estate has the potential to impact a water body up at the hills, up at the Lavante Hill Hills in Picton. Okay, so essentially, what they're really talking about is really geographically impossible. All right. And as I indicated, there is no risk to any major water body. Certainly not any risk to any water body that we, the people in Tobago, depend on for potable water. I want to mention the activities, some of the activities that the committee, through some of its affiliate organizations, have been doing and so on. With respect to any risk at Studley Park, we would have noted this quite early and so on, that potentially in the event of rainfall and so on, right, notwithstanding the best efforts that we made to line and to provide berms around the cells and so on, that there is always a possibility, although relatively improbable, there's always a possibility of there being some kind of leaching and there being some kind of overflow and so on, right? In risk management, you have to plan for things notwithstanding the relatively low probabilities, right? So one of the things that we committed to, and one of the things that we have been doing is consistent monitoring of the water quality in the stream and so on that is in the Studley Park area, right? And for those of us who are familiar, that is a stream that essentially goes into the Studley Park Bay. Well, the current name is really the Barbados Bay. That is just east of the Studley Park fishing facility. So we have been doing water quality monitoring there in that stream, and we have also been doing water quality monitoring in the Barbados Bay area. We have 3 sample points in the Barbados Bay area, from the mouth of the river down to the Studley Park jetty that is operated by the Studley Park Industries Limited. And I am happy and of course very, very confident to say that the readings that we have actually been getting from that from those sample points, right? And of course, the latest reading we got was about 9:30 a.m. yesterday morning. Those readings are remarkably consistent with the readings that we actually got before the oil spill. Right? So what this actually says is that there has been no impact, no chemical impact or anything of that nature on the water bodies in the area that could be associated with the storage of the oil up at Studley Park. So that's the chemical testing and so on. All right. I also wanted to mention that, you know, so some people say that you should always trust your eyes, right? And one of the things that we do in terms of water quality testing is to make visual observations, visual and sensory observations. So you are not getting any petrochemical scent coming from the area. There is no visible sheen in any of the water bodies there. And apart from that, the biological life is quite active in that stream, right? You have all your fishes, you have your tadpoles, you have your crabs, all of those things and so on, right? And of course, you have dragonflies, and dragonflies are a very accurate indicator of good to reasonable water quality, and that area is filled with dragonflies and so on. Right, so we have been doing the monitoring and so on, and those are the results of the monitoring. Finally, where are we? The committee, as part of its mandate, was responsible for delivering the final disposal of the solution for the final disposal of the oil up at Studley Park. And that is something that we were working on consistently since March of this year. Suffice it to say that in May of this year, the Tobago House of Assembly was approached by one of its partners, and that is the Ministry of Energy, who have supported us. Who have supported us significantly in really addressing the issues related to the oil spill here in Tobago. So we were approached by the ministry in a meeting, and the ministry essentially offered to take over responsibility for the final solution, for the final disposal of the oil that was based at Studley Park. After a period of discussion, the Tobago House of Assembly agreed that the ministry would take over the responsibility for the disposal of the oil at Studley Park. And correspondence was dispatched to the ministry to that effect. Right? That correspondence was dated the 4th of June 2024, and it was signed by the chief administrator, addressed to the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries. In that letter, the chief administrator appointed me as the point of contact in Tobago. So from time to time, I would correspond with our good friends at the ministry with respect to progress on the matter and so on. Right, and of course, we are very grateful for the assistance that they're providing. By letter dated the 6th of August 2024, the ministry formally responded to the letter that the chief administrator dispatched on the 4th of June, and essentially accepted the offer. And in that letter, gave a very brief update as to where they were, indicating that that they are looking at different solutions, and in due course, the Tobago Assembly would be appraised, with respect to the preferred method of dealing with the oil and things of that nature. Suffice it to say, by letter dated the 1st of November, which was essentially last week Friday, the ministry's agent for effecting the final disposal of the oil spill in Tobago, that is the National Gas Company, NGC. The ministry's agent would have dispatched a letter to the division with responsibility for health, and of course they are also responsible for the Studley Park landfill. And the ministry would have dispatched a letter requesting permission of formal permission to enter the site, to essentially start operations to clean up the area and so on. Right now, of course, the very first stage in that process is really getting a certificate of environmental clearance. So that was the basis of their immediate request, right? And this is a specific requirement of the CEC process when you are asked to operate in an area that you do not have management control over, right? You must have expressed permission from the entity that has management control and so on, right? So we were very happy. We are very happy that the ministry is essentially at this point, right? And we are going to continue to work with the ministry as we have always done. They remain our unwavering partners in dealing with this particular issue. And as the situation develops, as Dr. B. Yisrael would have indicated, we would continue to communicate with the Tobago public and the Trinidad public and so on, so that you can be aware of what is happening in the Tobago space. And with that, I thank you and hand you over to Dr. B. Yisrael.
Thank you so much, Mr. Beckles. So as you can see, members of the public, this is a continual process. It is one that shows that Tobago experienced something that we've never experienced before, but we were able to ride above it. We were able to treat with the initial impact. We were able to have Carnival that same weekend or the week following. We've been able to do the kind of cleanup that allows us to almost forget that this thing happened on our shoreline. And we are now at the point where we are treating with the long-term solution of final disposal of the waste that is being stored temporarily at the Studley Park landfill. As we said before, this is all a work in progress, and we are thankful that we have been working so closely with all of our partners, those who are in Tobago and those who are in Trinidad, those who came on board internationally to help us weather this storm. And we are at this point now where the Ministry of Energy and Energy Affairs, Industries, thank you, has basically agreed that they will take responsibility for the final disposal of it, of course working very closely with us. And that is why we were happy to see the request from NGC to have access to the property, and we will continue the conversations as it relates to exactly what will happen to ensure that we provide a safe and environmentally friendly response to the final disposal of this material. Again, I actually want to thank the individuals who were part of the initial response, because we've shown that once again we little but we talawa and that we are able to do amazing things, and this is all part of us going towards being Tobago being the greatest little island on the planet. And I also want to even thank those who participated in the reporting that almost forced us to come back to the people of Tobago and to the wider public to have this kind of discussion, because as you can see, we have been doing quite a bit of work on the background, doing what we need to do to treat with it, but we may not have been communicating that with the public as well as we should have. So thank you for the opportunity to do such. At this point, I think we could open up for questions. If there are any questions going forward, we can treat with that.
Sure. So let me say thank you to the head table for taking us through very in-depth explanations of what is happening at the Studley Park landfill site as it regards the disposal of the oil from the oil spill. We now open for questions. We have one in-house question from Janelle D'Souza of the Trinidad and Tobago Newsday.
Good morning. You mentioned that the storage has not affected some of the streams and around Barbados Bay and so forth. But what has been the effect? Has there been any effect at all on the area?
Well, in the immediate aftermath of the immediate aftermath of the oil spill, I mean, of course there were impacts on the 15 kilometers of coastline for sure. Yeah, right. So that is obvious. With respect to any impacts associated with the storage of the material up at Studley Park, I just want to reiterate that there is no visible evidence of any impact on water quality resources and so on that the watershed in that particular area could actually facilitate. And I would have mentioned how we determine that. We determine that through water quality testing. The specific equipment that we use is called a multi-parameter sonde. It is a piece of equipment that is very expensive, and it is actually used by the United States EPA, right, for the water quality monitoring. And we use it to monitor freshwater sources as well as the nearshore coastal area in that Barbados Bay area. And of course, we consistently do the visual inspection to ensure that you don't have any dead fish, you don't have any dead crayfish, and so on. Those kinds of things. In addition to that, what we have done as a department, and I have been personally involved. I've been personally involved in this from time to time, and we actually reported to Mr. Stewart, is that during and after periods of very heavy rainfall, we always visit the site to look for any evidence of overspilling or runoff or anything like that and so on, right? And I'm very happy to report that we have not been able to report that to Mr. Stewart and so on, who would have probably been relatively annoyed with us and so on, because we would have been creating additional work for him and that kind of thing. So that is the nature of the monitoring and so on that we have been doing. And as I said, there's no visible impact. There's no impact that we can determine as a result of the water quality testing that we have been doing with the state-of-the-art equipment as well. Right. I probably should also mention as well, right? Just for emphasis, the material that is there essentially is bunker C fuel, right? Bunker C fuel is really a very heavy fuel oil, and so on, right? One of the things that some people may be concerned about is toxicity and stuff, right? One of the things I want to mention with respect to that is that the constituent chemical compounds, right, in bunker C fuel, okay, they are not very many of them are actually water soluble. So when you're actually thinking about toxicity associated with aquatic environments and so on, there's a very low concern about toxicity of bunker C fuel in aquatic environments compared to significantly lighter fuels, right? So that's not one of the big concerns that we actually have, right? If there is any toxicity, that toxicity is associated with bioaccumulation. So you essentially have to ingest it and that kind of thing.
I would add though that because I know that the public is seeing the cells as it relates to the work of the landfill, because remember the landfill is where we store our garbage, the garbage of the island. One of the impacts is that we at the Department of Public Health now do not have that space to store the garbage that the island produces, which takes us back to me giving a special thank you to the workers, the public health employees who man the landfill, because they are the ones, of course, in collaboration with everybody else, who had to literally find a space out of thin air as quickly as we were able to do it, and to prepare the site as quickly as we were able to do it, and still figure out how to manage the waste that we have coming in to the landfill, and still dispose of that in a safe manner. So in terms of that, let me publicly thank those individuals who work at the Studley Park landfill, because they are the ones who've really done human service as well to ensure that we had this as an option when we were all running around like chickens with our necks cut off.
So we don't have any more questions. So once again, I'd like to thank the head table. I'll start with Mr. Alan Stewart, Director at the Tobago Emergency Management Agency, Dr. Faith B. Israel, Deputy Chief Secretary and Secretary of Health, Wellness and Social Protection, and Mr. Linford Beckles, Chairman of the T.H.A. Multidisciplinary Oil Management Committee. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for viewing. We trust that today's press briefing brought much clarity to the valid concerns in the space, and we ask you to share it as much as possible so that others who missed it can be well informed. Thank you, and do have a good day.